The rain drummed against the window of Sarah's small apartment as she sat curled up on her worn couch, phone clutched in her trembling hands. 2 text messages glowed on the screen, each one pulling her heart in opposite directions. The first was from Marcus. "Good morning, beautiful. I made your favorite soup. Can I bring it over? I know you've been stressed about the work presentation." The second was from Daniel. "Hey Sarah, quick question about Sunday's worship practice. What time again?" Sarah's eyes lingered on Daniel's message, her heart doing that familiar painful flutter it always did when she saw his name. Then guilt washed over her as she glanced back at Marcus's message, the 4th thoughtful text he'd sent this week. She set the phone down and buried her face in her hands. "God," she whispered, "I don't understand what you're doing here." Sarah Chen had grown up in the church. Her parents were missionaries who had dedicated their lives to serving God in the Philippines before settling in Ohio when Sarah was 12. She knew the Bible stories, could quote scripture, and had led her college Bible study group for 3 years. Everyone at Grace Community Church saw her as the model Christian woman, always smiling, always serving, always faithful. But nobody knew about the war raging inside her heart. Marcus Reeves had been pursuing Sarah for nearly 8 months. He was everything a Christian woman should want. A devoted worship leader with a gentle spirit, financially stable as a civil engineer, and deeply committed to his faith. He prayed with intention, served at the homeless shelter every Saturday, and treated Sarah like she was the most precious person on earth. He noticed everything. When she mentioned she liked hydrangeas once in passing, he brought her a small potted plant the next week. When she was overwhelmed with her work as a middle school teacher, he organized her classroom supplies without being asked. He listened when she talked, remembered the small details, and pursued her with patient consistency that never crossed into pressure. Sarah respected him. She appreciated him. She tried so hard to love him, but her heart remained stubbornly unmoved. Then there was Daniel Park, the new associate pastor who had joined their church 6 months ago. He was passionate about ministry, funny in that unexpected way that made everyone laugh during serious moments, and had a way of teaching scripture that made ancient words feel alive and relevant. When he preached, Sarah felt like God was speaking directly to her soul. She had fallen for him almost immediately, though she'd tried desperately to stop herself. Daniel was kind to everyone, but to Sarah, he was simply friendly, polite, professional. He treated her exactly the same way he treated every other person at church, with warm but detached care. When she stayed late to help him prepare materials for youth group, he thanked her the same way he'd thank anyone. When she brought him coffee the way he liked it, he smiled gratefully and then turned his attention back to his sermon notes. Sarah had prayed about it constantly. She'd fasted. She'd asked God to remove the feelings, to help her see Marcus the way she saw Daniel, to fix whatever was broken in her heart. But night after night, it was Daniel's face she saw before falling asleep. And morning after morning, it was Marcus's messages that greeted her with unwavering devotion. "You look troubled, sweetheart." Sarah glanced up from her journal to see Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman from church who had been a prayer warrior for over 40 years. She had that gentle wisdom in her eyes that came from decades of walking with God through storms. "May I join you?" Mrs. Patterson asked, already pulling out the chair across from Sarah at the corner coffee shop. Sarah managed a weak smile. "Of course." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Mrs. Patterson spoke again. "I've been praying for you lately. The Lord keeps bringing you to mind during my morning prayers." Tears immediately sprang to Sarah's eyes, surprising her with their sudden appearance. She blinked them back quickly. "I'm fine, really. Child, I've been watching people try to hide their hearts for 73 years. You're carrying something heavy, and you don't have to carry it alone." The kindness in her voice broke something loose in Sarah. Before she knew it, words were spilling out. The confusion, the guilt, the feeling of being torn between what seemed right and what her heart wanted. Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption, her weathered hands wrapped around her teacup, her eyes full of compassion. When Sarah finally fell silent, emotionally exhausted, the older woman reached across the table and covered Sarah's hand with her own. "Let me tell you a story," Mrs. Patterson said. "When I was your age, there was a man named Harold who wanted to marry me. He was a good man, a godly man. Everyone said we'd be perfect together. And there was another man, James, who I thought hung the moon and stars. James didn't know I existed, not in that way." Sarah's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I married Harold," Mrs. Patterson said simply, "because everyone said it was the wise choice, the godly choice. He loved God, he loved me, and I thought surely love would grow." "Did it?" Sarah whispered. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with an old sadness. Harold was a wonderful man, and we had 42 years together before the Lord called him home. I learned to appreciate him, to respect him, to care for him deeply. But Sarah, I never loved him the way a wife should love her husband, and he knew it. He felt it every day of our marriage, though he was too kind to ever say it. Sarah felt her stomach drop. But you did the right thing, didn't you? You chose the godly man? Did I? Mrs. Patterson asked gently. Or did I choose what seemed safe and expected? And call it God's will without truly seeking his heart? See, I never asked God what he wanted. I just assumed that because Harold, was a good Christian man who loved me, that must be God's plan. I never considered that maybe God had something different in mind, or that maybe neither option was his best for me in that season. What happened to James? Sarah asked quietly. He married a lovely woman 2 years later. They were truly happy together, suited for each other in a way Harold and I never were. Mrs. Patterson squeezed Sarah's hand. Here's what I learned too late, sweetheart. Love without God is indeed empty and will fail. But godliness without genuine love in a marriage is also not God's design. Marriage is a picture of Christ and the church, and while we learn and grow in love, we're not meant to spend our lives pretending to feel something we don't, hoping it will magically appear. Sarah's mind was reeling. So what should I do? You should actually ask God, child. Not tell him what you think the answer should be. Not assume you already know. Ask him with an open heart, ready to hear whatever he says, even if it's not what you expect. 2 weeks later, everything came to a head at the church's annual missions banquet. Sarah had agreed to help with the event, which meant arriving early to set up. She was arranging flowers on the tables when Daniel walked in, carrying boxes of programs. Hey Sarah, thanks for being here, he said warmly, setting down the boxes. You're always so reliable. Reliable. The word stung more than it should have. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, and Sarah found herself stealing glances at him, memorizing the way he concentrated when he was focused on a task, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Can I ask you something? Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. Sarah's heart jumped. Sure. It's about Marcus, Daniel said, and Sarah's hope deflated instantly. He came to me for counsel yesterday. He's thinking about proposing to you soon. The room spun. Sarah gripped the edge of the table. He what? He wanted pastoral advice on timing, on how to honor you and God in the process. Daniel looked at her with a gentle smile. You're a blessed woman, Sarah. Marcus is one of the finest men I've known. His love for you is so pure, so patient. It reminds me of how Christ loves the church. Each word was like a knife. Sarah tried to speak but couldn't find her voice. Daniel continued, oblivious to her distress. I told him I thought you two would be a beautiful example of godly marriage. The way he pursues you with such selfless devotion, and the way you serve alongside him in ministry, it's really beautiful to witness. Daniel, Sarah started, but was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Marcus walked in, his face lighting up when he saw Sarah. There you are. I brought you dinner since I knew you'd be here late. He held up a bag from her favorite Thai restaurant. Daniel clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Man, you're setting the bar high for the rest of us. I'll leave you two alone. He winked at Sarah and left the room. Sarah stood frozen, staring at Marcus, who looked so hopeful, so full of love. This kind, good man who had never been anything but wonderful to her. This man who loved God and loved her and deserved someone who could love him back the way he deserved. Sarah? Marcus's smile faded. Are you okay? You look pale. And suddenly, standing there in the church fellowship hall surrounded by half-decorated tables, Sarah couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep hoping her feelings would change, couldn't keep accepting his love when she had nothing genuine to give in return. Marcus, we need to talk, she said, her voice shaking. They sat in the empty parking lot in Marcus's car, the dinner growing cold on the dashboard. Sarah had been crying for 10 minutes while Marcus held her hand, waiting patiently for her to find her words, even though she could see the fear growing in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Sarah finally whispered. I'm so sorry, Marcus. For what? His voice was gentle, but she heard the tremor in it. For not being honest, for letting this go on when I knew my heart wasn't. She couldn't finish. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You don't love me. It wasn't a question. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I've tried. God knows I've tried. You're everything I should want. You're kind and godly and patient, and you've treated me better than I ever knew I could be treated. But I can't. I can't make myself feel what isn't there. It's Daniel, isn't it? Marcus said quietly. Sarah's head snapped up. How did you… I'm not blind, Sarah. I've seen the way you look at him. The way you light up when he's around. Marcus's voice cracked. I kept hoping that if I just loved you enough, if I just showed you what real devotion looked like, you'd eventually see me instead. Marcus, you deserve someone who looks at you the way I look at Daniel. You deserve someone whose heart races when you walk in the room, who thinks about you first thing in the morning, who doesn't have to try to feel what should come naturally. He let out a shaky breath. Does Daniel feel the same way about you? No, Sarah said miserably. He barely notices me, and that's not why I'm doing this. I'm not ending things with you to pursue him. I'm ending things because it's not fair to you to keep accepting your love when I can't truly return it. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. You know what the hardest part is? I've been praying for you to love me back. I've been asking God to change your heart, to help you see me, and I felt so sure that because I was loving you the right way, the godly way, that He would reward that He would give you to me as a blessing for being faithful. I thought the same thing, Sarah admitted. I thought if I just tried hard enough, if I was faithful enough, God would change my feelings, that I could somehow earn the right response from my heart. They sat in silence, both crying, both grieving the death of what Marcus had hoped for and what Sarah had tried so hard to feel. I need to tell you something, Marcus finally said. Even though this is killing me, even though I've never hurt this much, I'm grateful you're being honest now. My parents, they had a marriage like what ours would have been. My mom cared for my dad, but she never loved him. Not really. I grew up watching my father try to win a heart that was never going to be his, and watching my mother feel guilty for something she couldn't control. I promised myself I'd never settle for that. He turned to look at Sarah directly. So thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth before we made vows we'd both regret. Sarah sobbed. You're an amazing man. Marcus, truly, some woman is going to be so blessed to be loved by you. And some man, whether it's Daniel or someone else, will be blessed to have your heart when you're ready, to give it freely. He squeezed her hand one last time. I need to go now. I need to grieve this. I understand, Sarah whispered. She watched him drive away, and even through her tears, she felt something she hadn't felt in months, a strange, painful peace. The next few months were the hardest of Sarah's life. Word spread through the church about the breakup, and Sarah felt the weight of judgment from people who had expected an engagement announcement, not a separation. Some people were kind, but others whispered about her being too picky, too focused on feelings instead of godly character. Marcus handled it with grace, asking people not to blame Sarah and requesting privacy as they both healed. His kindness, even in pain, made Sarah question her decision 100 times. Was she making a terrible mistake? Had she thrown away a good thing while chasing a fantasy? Daniel remained friendly but distant, and Sarah forced herself to accept that nothing would ever happen there. She stopped volunteering for every event he led, stopped finding excuses to be around him, stopped hoping he'd suddenly see her differently. Instead, she did something she'd never really done before. She got truly honest with God. Late one night, alone in her apartment, Sarah knelt beside her bed and prayed with raw honesty. God, I don't understand your plan. I don't understand why you'd let me feel this way about someone who doesn't feel the same. I don't understand why a good man's love isn't enough for me. I don't understand what you want from me. But I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of performing Christianity. I'm tired of trying to figure out the right answer instead of seeking you. So here I am, broken and confused and lost. Show me who you are. Teach me what real love is. Not the love I think I should feel. Not the love someone else feels for me, but your love. Start there. And if you want me to be alone for the rest of my life while I learn this, then I accept that. I just want to know you more than I want to solve this puzzle. Something shifted in that moment. Not a lightning bolt answer, not a clear direction, but a deep sense of being seen and known and held by a God who wasn't disappointed in her confusion. She started meeting with Mrs. Patterson weekly for prayer and mentorship. She started journaling her prayers and actually listening for God's responses, instead of just presenting Him with her wish list. She started reading her Bible not to find answers to her relationship questions, but simply to know God better. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, things began to change, not in her circumstances, but in her heart. 4 months after the breakup, Sarah was in her classroom after school when her phone rang. It was Daniel. Her heart still fluttered. She was working on that, but she answered calmly. Hey Daniel, what's up? Sarah, are you free to talk? I mean, really talk? Something in his voice made her nervous. Sure, I can come to the church if… Actually, I'm outside your school. I saw your car was still here. Can I come in? 5 minutes later, Daniel was sitting in one of her students' tiny chairs, looking more serious than she'd ever seen him. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. Sarah blinked. For what? For being blind. For being oblivious. He ran his hand through his hair. Sarah, Marcus came to see me last week. Sarah's stomach dropped. Oh? He told me about why you two broke. Up everything, including how you felt about me. Daniel looked at her with such earnest eyes, and then he said something that wrecked me. He said, I've learned that you can't love someone into loving you back, no matter how godly that love is. But you can blind yourself to someone who's been trying to show you their heart, because you weren't looking for it. Sarah's mouth went dry. Daniel, you don't have to… Let me finish, please, he interrupted gently. After Marcus left, I started praying. Really praying, and God started showing me all these moments I'd overlooked. The way you always knew how I took my coffee. The way you anticipated what I needed before I asked. The way your face lit up when you talked about scripture. The way you served so selflessly without expecting recognition. He moved from the tiny chair to kneel in front of her. Sarah, I started this conversation with an apology. But I need to be honest. I'm not sorry I didn't see it before now. Sarah's heart felt like it might break all over again. Of course, now that she'd finally started healing. Now that she'd started finding peace in being alone with God. I'm not sorry, Daniel continued, because I think we both needed this time. You needed to learn that you couldn't force yourself to love Marcus just because he was godly. And I needed to learn that I'd been so focused on ministry, so protective of my heart after my last relationship ended badly, that I'd built walls that kept me from seeing what God was offering. Daniel, what are you saying? Sarah whispered. I'm saying that over these past months, watching you from a distance, seeing how you've grown in your faith, how you handled the breakup with such grace, how you've pursued God instead of pursuing me or trying to win back Marcus, Sarah, my heart finally woke up, and now I can't stop thinking about you. Now I see you everywhere. Now I understand what Marcus was talking about. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face. But I'm still figuring things out. I'm still learning to let God shape my understanding of love. I don't want to be someone's project or… You're not, Daniel said firmly. Sarah, I'm not asking you to jump into a relationship. I'm just asking if maybe we could start over. As friends who are both seeking God first. Who are both learning what it means to love well. Who are both figuring out if maybe God has been writing a story we couldn't see while we were too busy. Trying to write our own. Sarah thought about Marcus. About his patient love that she couldn't force herself to return. She thought about her months of pursuing Daniel emotionally while he remained unaware. She thought about Mrs. Patterson's story and the warning about mistaking godliness for God's will. I need you to understand something, Sarah said slowly. I spent months trying to make myself love Marcus because he was godly. I can't. I won't enter into something with you just because my feelings are finally being returned. That's just the opposite side of the same mistake. Daniel nodded. I understand. So what do you need? I need to keep putting God first. I need to know that you're seeking Him about this, not just following feelings. And I need us to go so slowly that it might drive us both crazy. She smiled through her tears. Because I'm learning that love without God is empty. But godly character without genuine love isn't God's design either. There has to be both, real feeling and real commitment to God. I can do slow, Daniel said softly. I can do seeking God together. I can do building something on the right foundation this time. Sarah and Daniel didn't start officially dating for another 3 months. They met weekly for coffee to discuss what they were, learning in their individual walks with God. They prayed together, awkward at first, then increasingly natural. They studied what Scripture actually said about love and marriage and partnership. They also talked honestly about their fears. Daniel shared about his previous relationship that had ended in betrayal, about how he'd thrown himself into ministry to avoid dealing with his broken heart. Sarah shared about the pressure she'd felt to perform Christianity, to be the perfect Christian girl who made all the right choices. Mrs. Patterson met with them once a month, asking hard questions, pointing out blind spots, celebrating growth. The church had mixed reactions. Some people celebrated, seeing two godly people taking a wise approach to relationship. Others whispered that Sarah had left Marcus waiting in the wings for what she really wanted all along. Those whispers hurt. But Sarah was learning that she couldn't control what others thought. She could only seek to honor God with her choices. Marcus incredibly became a quiet supporter. 6 months after the breakup, he approached Sarah after church service. "I'm glad it's working out with you two," he said sincerely. "And I'm thankful, really thankful, that you were honest with me before we made a bigger commitment. I'm learning that God's no to one thing is often his yes to something better, even when we can't see it yet." Are you doing okay?" Sarah asked carefully. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, she saw that it reached his eyes. "I'm actually better than okay. Grief was hard, but it forced me to examine why I was so desperate to make us work. I realized I was trying to prove something to God, like I could earn his blessing through perfect pursuit of you. I'm learning to rest in his love instead of trying to earn it." He paused, then added, "And there's someone new I've started talking to. Very slowly, very carefully. Someone whose eyes light up when she sees me the way yours never did. I'm not rushing anything, but I'm learning what mutual attraction actually feels like, and it's really different. Really good." Sarah hugged him, grateful beyond words for his grace. Sarah stood in her wedding dress, staring at herself in the mirror. In a few minutes, she would walk down the aisle to marry Daniel. But unlike the fantasy version she'd imagined a year and a half ago, this wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, a real beginning, built on the right foundation. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her eyes misty. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. "What if I'm still getting it wrong? What if—" "Stop," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "You and Daniel have sought God honestly. You've built your relationship on friendship and faith. You've gone slowly and carefully. You've worked through hard questions. You've invited counsel and correction. You love each other genuinely while both loving God supremely. That's all anyone can do." "It's so different from what I expected," Sarah said. "When I was trying to force myself to love Marcus, I thought that was what godliness looked like, choosing the right person on paper regardless of feelings. And when I was pining after Daniel, I thought that was what love looked like, intense emotion that I had to chase. But this is both and neither." "Tell me what you've learned," Mrs. Patterson prompted. Sarah thought for a moment. "I've learned that love without God is just infatuation. It burns hot and dies fast. But godly character without genuine love is just obligation. It's sustainable but empty. God's design is something beautiful in between. A love that's rooted in real affection and committed to God's purposes. Feelings matter, but they're not everything. Godliness matters, but it's not enough on its own. We need both, aligned and submitted to God." "And what about the title of your story?" Mrs. Patterson asked with a knowing smile. "Love without God versus godly love without return?" "Neither one is God's best," Sarah said firmly. "Love without God is empty, no matter how passionate. But giving someone godly love when there's no genuine feeling on our part isn't loving, it's lying, to them and to ourselves." Marcus deserved someone who could love him with her whole heart, not just her sense of duty. And Daniel deserved someone who chose him because God brought them together, not because I was trying to force my will. She turned to face her mentor. "The real question isn't which kind of love is better. It's about learning to let God define love entirely, letting him show us that real love includes both genuine feeling and godly commitment, both attraction and character, both passion and purpose. It's not either or. It's both, woven together by God's hand." Mrs. Patterson pulled her into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetheart, you learned in 18 months what took me decades to understand. That's the power of actually asking God instead of assuming we know His will." A knock on the door interrupted them. Sarah's father poked his head in. "Ready, honey? Everyone's waiting." Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. As she walked toward the sanctuary, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The confusion, the heartbreak, the hard choices, the slow growth. She thought about Marcus, who had shown her what selfless love looked like, but whom she couldn't love in return, teaching her that godly character alone wasn't enough. She thought about Daniel, whom she'd chased emotionally while he remained unaware, teaching her that feelings alone weren't enough either. And she thought about the months in between, the desert season when she'd had neither Marcus's love nor Daniel's attention, when she'd had nothing but God Himself. That season had been the most painful and the most precious, because that's when she'd finally stopped trying to orchestrate her own story and started asking God to write it instead. The music swelled, the doors opened, and Sarah walked forward, not toward a fantasy or an obligation, but toward a partnership built on the right foundation, a love that was both genuine in feeling and godly in commitment, both romantic and righteous, both her choice and God's plan. As she reached the altar and took Daniel's hands, she caught Marcus's eye in the third row. He smiled at her, genuinely happy, sitting next to a lovely woman whose hand he held gently. Sarah smiled back, grateful, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. God's love is perfect. And when we seek Him first, really seek Him, not just check the boxes of godliness, He teaches us to love the way He intended. Not love without God, which is empty. Not godly love without genuine feeling, which is obligation. But real love, the kind that reflects His heart. Passionate and pure, emotional and eternal, human and holy, all woven together in beautiful, surrender to the one who invented love in the first place. Dearly beloved, the pastor began, and Sarah's heart was full, not with the anxious striving she'd carried for so long, but with the peaceful confidence that comes from finally letting God be God, and letting love be what He always meant it to be. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13:13.